everybody, and at this week's at Bungie, there was some interesting stuff about matchmaking. Now, there were some other stuff in there introducing you to the fire team that did the raid along on Wednesday was also there. So if you want to see the full article, a link will be in the description. But let's get into this matchmaking because this was definitely the meat and potatoes of the article. And like I said, Bungie's definitely listening when it comes to skill-based matchmaking. Whether they take our criticism and run with that is a different story. But let's go ahead and go through what they said about matchmaking. So they kick things off by saying Crucible matchmaking was designed to be as fast and fair as possible. These are complex systems that serve millions of players. More people enjoying the Crucible means healthier matchmaking pools and a stronger community overall. We hear your feedback about how that should work. And then they go forward to give us some facts about how their matchmaking does actually work. So when it comes to matchmaking, this is their design goals. Provide you with a clean connection to your fellow players, keep the time you spend in orbit between matches to a minimum, and set a match between you and a worthy opponent in that order. So let's go through that again. These are in order, and these are their design goals. Provide you with a clean connection to your fellow players, so they do not want us to have red bars. They don't want us to experience that teleporting frequently, which we do. Keep the time you spend in orbit between matches to a minimum. Now, I would have liked them to be a little bit more specific on what that actually means, like what is acceptable and what is not acceptable when it comes to the people who deal with matchmaking. What do they think is okay and what's not okay? Because if I go and play Titanfall or COD, for example, I'll get into a match within the first, I don't know, minute or less. When it comes to Destiny, I can be sitting in orbit for 3 to 5 minutes, which feels kind of excessive. And then in the last place, set a match between you and a worthy opponent. So that's the order of their matchmaking goals. Now they go on to explain how they go about finding you a match. So this is what the matchmaking system actually does when it's looking at you and evaluating other people for you to play with. First, we identify a pool of available players with a good connection to you. So that should be players that are close by. Within that pool, we choose players closely matched to your personal skill rating. So they first look at, are these connection good? Okay, who within here will be a good opponent for this person? If we can't find players within that pool, we widen the variance in skill. So they go back to just looking at more connections that are close and not so caring about skill as much. If that doesn't work, we expand the search again with more variance in connection quality. So then that's when they start looking at yellow bars, red bars, people who live further away from you. If they can't find people who are close to you, good connection within your skill rating, without your skill rating, they then start looking at people with worse connections. Once enough players are selected, we then break them out into equally skilled teams. So that also means that if you are a god, you can have a bunch of crappy people on your team and go against a bunch of mediocre people. And that's how that matchmaking does work. Quite a lot of times that's what it seems like it works. I'm pretty sure I heard someone actually confirm that that's something that happens frequently due to them doing this, splitting it into equal teams. If you're a super good player, you will get people who are really, really, really bad to even out your team to go against an enemy team of like equally medium so-so players. And then a note at the end of this is that skill is not a factor in Trials of Osiris. You are matched against players with good connections with similar scorecards. So that's how Trials has always been. It's been focused on connection because we wouldn't want people to have this competitive environment and then go against people who are super laggy. That would be really bad. So Trials has always been like that. It's gotten a little bit stricter when it comes to the similar scorecards thing, because like I always say, we end up going against people super far away when we hit about that 5-win mark. So that is the breakdown of their design goals when it comes to matchmaking and how it goes about finding you a match. This is simplified, so it's not the super in-depth statistical thing that maybe a lot of us would want, but that is what is going on. Following that little design goals and how matchmaking works, they then go on to say that connection quality is always the highest priority factor in Destiny matchmaking. It's the first criteria for the search and the last value we're willing to compromise to set the match. When possible, we introduce you to opponents that will put up a respectable fight, but not at the expense of a good connection. We strive for the ideal, but life on the internet is chaotic, so it's inevitable that we'll see red bars or matches that end with the enforcement of the mercy rule. They then go on to answer some of our questions, which I will also put in this video. So first question, why are you teaming me up with weaker teammates? We favor connection quality over skill ratings. If we favored skill over connection, you'd be more likely to have people closer to your skill level on both teams. If you want better teammates, they're likely waiting for you in our recruitment forums. Why can't you match fire teams against fire teams? If we waited for perfectly weighted teams to find each other, you might spend more time in orbit than in game. Fire teams can and do still match up against one another, but fast matchmaking is a priority. All of that makes sense. Not a problem whatsoever. What is Destiny's network tick rate? This is something that has been a big issue within a lot of communities, and it's been talked about a lot very frequently and very recently in Destiny. Combat damage is sampled at 30 Hz, 30 times per second. We track and network how your shots land in every frame of gameplay you can see. You receive updates on systems like scoring or ammo spawn timers from an activity host at 10 Hz, 10 times per second. Now, it's worth noting that this is a lot slower than pretty much every game out there. If you want to do some research on the topic, you are more than willing to do that. But I don't really go into in-depth explanation of what this means, but just know that this is a lot slower than a lot of other games out there. Do you try to force players into a 50% win-loss ratio? Nope. As we've stated, your personal performance is a factor in the Guardians you end up confronting in battle, but we do nothing to artificially influence win streaks or alter individual player statistics. Now, I will say that I think that question and that answer was probably not worded very well, because there was definitely a time where someone from Bungie said that they want people to have a 50% win-loss ratio. They're trying to aim for that. They want it to be at that 50%. They don't want someone winning 100% and just pub stomping everyone. They don't want someone having an awful experience, so they wanted to aim for 50%. So I'm pretty sure we have seen someone from Bungie say that. So I think that the force players into a 50% win-loss was worded very poorly. I think it should have just been, do you want players to have a 50% win-loss ratio about that? Because then the answer is that no, of course we don't force you into a 50% win-loss. It's not gonna be like, oh man, this guy's at 54%. Let's go and put him against a bunch of tryhards so he loses. That's obviously not happening. Now, the last question, which is one of the bigger issues that has hit a lot of people, and that is, why can't I just relax and enjoy some matches with my friends? And their answer was, we introduced private matches to the Crucible with the launch of Destiny Rise of Iron so that you could do just that. Take matchmaking into your own hands and make the Crucible what you want it to be. Now, this is going to be the thing that I have the most to say about, because I don't think that makes any sense. And I don't want to be complaining, I don't want to be moaning, I don't want to sound like I'm being super negative, but private matches, they are the biggest thing and the biggest deal for competitive play, for people to, instead having to match up to do scrims against each other or tournament play against each other and do the crazy ridiculous 3-2-1 evaluating, searching, evaluating. Instead of having to do that, they can just go into a private match and they can make that happen. When it comes to just having fun in the Crucible with your friends, I don't think the answer should be go into private matches. And that especially shouldn't be the answer to solo players who are having a bad time. I see time and time again from solo players, average, below average, or top 1% players who are saying, I go into the Crucible, I get matched against someone who is in a total different country to me, and it's laggy. Why is this happening? People assume that it's happening because skill-based matchmaking is coming in as more of a priority than it should. Because for me, for example, if I go in solo, there's no reason why there isn't 11 other players within the US, even if that's on the East Coast, whatever. But there should be 11 other players on the West Coast for me to play with. I shouldn't have to go searching in Australia and in the UK. That shouldn't happen if connection is at the forefront, because even if that person in Australia or the UK has an amazing internet and they're showing as being super great and awesome, they are too far away from me from a ping standpoint to have a good connection to me. We're not going to have a good connection to one another. It's just not going to happen. That's how distance works. That is a legitimate issue that a lot of people are having. I've seen it in the comments from all of you guys that a few of you have brought it up, where you are a very, very high skill rated player and you want to play with your friends who are lower skill rating, and your friends don't have a good time because they are going against your skill rating, which is super duper sweaty and super not fun for them. So I've seen that argument a lot, and I think that's a genuine concern. I think I don't know why you shouldn't be able to just go into the Crucible, load up the Crucible with your friends, and come into contact with a variety of different skill level players. That response was a little short-sighted as to what the Crucible is maybe supposed to be, because I don't know where that comes into it. I don't really know why that's even an answer that would be put with that. I'm a high-skilled player. I want to enjoy the Crucible with my friends, but they don't like playing with me because they go against super sweaty people. The answer to that is not go into private matches. I don't really think that's the answer. And it seems a little bit strange where it's like private matches is supposed to be the place where you have fun and relax, and regular Crucible is super competitive. That doesn't really make any sense for the way that Destiny is set up whatsoever, because I can go into the Crucible and I can be improving as a player, but it doesn't feel rewarding to improve as a player. It doesn't feel rewarding to be in this super competitive environment because there's nothing that shows my skill rating. There's no kind of reward for me getting to a higher skill rating. And I think that's where the argument for a ranked playlist and a casual playlist is super strong, and I really do believe that would be the biggest fix for this whole debacle. Would be, I get to go in a ranked playlist, I get to have a visual representation of what my skill rating is, I get rewarded for playing in that super competitive mode and being super sweaty, but then I also have this casual playlist that I can go and play with my friends, we can mess around using guns that aren't that good, and I think that would be a good balance. I think I might have rambled a little bit there and lost what I was originally talking about, but basically I don't think saying private matches is where you go have fun is an answer to why can't I go into the regular Crucible and enjoy it with my friends. So I don't know how I feel about that really. And then they go on to say the last time we updated these matchmaking settings was August this year. Today we identified and fixed a bug that were causing personal skill ratings to be calculated incorrectly in special supremacy variants, i.e. Rumble, Inferno, and Iron Banner. We're always curious about what you have to say about the games you play. Our feedback forum is where we look for thoughts and ideas. If you've taken the time to explain your perceptions of matchmaking, know that our work on the Crucible is never finished. So that's basically it. And my response to this whole article is, again, I don't want to sound moany and complainy and negative and awful person, but I think that maybe some of the questions were just interpreted in the wrong way, so the answers given look very strange to all of us that have been a part of this discussion very actively. Just the questions that were picked look very strange and the answers look very strange. I think ultimately what I take away from this article is that Bungie thinks that their matchmaking is totally fine, because they do have connection first and then it's skill, and everyone's over here going skill-based matchmaking needs to go because it's too much of a focus, and Bungie's like, no, it's not the main focus, so it's not too much of a focus. And I think ultimately, if we are going to have a proper discussion about this, it cannot just be a little insert in an article that vaguely goes over some of the stuff that matchmaking does. For example, I want to know what an acceptable ping time is. So when I load into matchmaking into the Crucible and Bungie's looking for people to put me with, what is an acceptable ping time to that person to have us match together? Because I get put against people in the UK and Australia, and even if they have the best internet, our ping times to one another are never going to be good because, like I said, that's just the way it works. So I want to know what an acceptable ping time is. I also want to know what an acceptable amount of time in orbit is, because right now I am experiencing very long times in orbit, and I am experiencing lag. I'm experiencing people from other parts of the world, and I just want more details. I would love to know player population and see if that is bringing in some of these issues. I basically just want more transparency. I just want more transparency, more facts, more statistics, more everything. I just want to know more. And I think it would be super great if Bungie could do a state of the game stream, just like they do all these other streams. And especially as they have a Twitch studio and they're trying to be more integrated with their community, I think that it would be really great to have a state of the game where they talk about all of this stuff. They take us through how matchmaking works. They explain why you will get put against people in other countries across the world. I want all of that explained because I don't think we can have a proper conversation with what we were given today. Because essentially what we were given today is everything is fine, connection is always first, and if you want to have fun with your friends casually, go into private matches, which doesn't really help. Doesn't really help. So let me know in the comment section. Let me know if I'm just being a bitch and complaining. Although that's really mean to say. You shouldn't say that about a person. But you can let me know if I'm wrong and taking this out of context. I would love to know your opinions about the article in the comment section. Please go all out in the comment section and let me know what you thought of the article. And I will speak to you awesome people later. Bye.